Hello, and thanks for joining us. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the hour. At least 20 Palestinians are killed in an Israeli airstrike in Gaza. Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Majid Ravanchi says the U.S. must rule out any further strikes on Iran if it wants to resume diplomatic talks. Plus, with temperatures going higher in Europe, Angola says it's open for tourism. We'll be talking to the minister on the possibilities that exist. Let's begin the world today. Welcome, everyone. Medics and eyewitnesses say at least 20 Palestinians have been killed in an Israeli airstrike. They hit a popular seafront cafe frequented by activists, journalists and locals in western Gaza. A spokesperson for the Gaza Civil Defense says rescue teams evacuated 20 bodies, while emergency crews helped move the wounded to hospital. Videos posted by the activists on social media appear to show the moment a missile reportedly fired from an Israeli warplane struck the area. Footage captured the aftermath of the attack with bodies scattered across the ground. Al-Baka cafeteria had become a well-known space for journalists, activists and remote workers, offering internet access, seating and workspace along Gaza's Mediterranean coast. According to witnesses, the attack came after Israel carried out a wave of airstrikes across the Gaza Strip overnight, triggering the mass displacement of hundreds of Palestinian families. While Israel has vowed to keep the Golan Heights under any future agreements with Syria, Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar, addressing a joint press conference today, said Israel ruled over the Golan Heights more than 40 years ago, and it will remain as part of Israel under any peace agreement. Adding, we have an interest in including countries such as our neighbors, Syria and Lebanon, into the circle of peace and normalization. On Sunday, U.S. President Donald Trump said that some countries expressed interest in joining the normalization agreements between Arab countries and Israel, known as the Abraham Accord. In 2020, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco signed U.S.-sponsored agreements to normalize relations with Israel, in which became known as the Abraham Accords. And since 1967, Israel has occupied the majority of Syria's Golan Heights.
We must strive to help the civilian population without strengthening Hamas. We have also opportunities in front of us. We paid for the new reality in the Middle East with the blood of our soldiers and citizens. Israel is interested in expanding the Abraham Accord circle of peace and normalization. We have an interest in adding countries such as Syria and Lebanon, our neighbors, to the circle of peace and normalization, while safeguarding Israel's essential and security interests. Israel applied its law to the Golan Heights over 40 years ago. In any peace agreement, the Golan will remain part of the state of Israel. I don't want to speculate, but we will welcome Syria, as I said, to the peace and normalization circle in the Middle East as much as we will welcome the Saudis to join. We want to have good relations with all our neighbors at the same level. With regard to our position on the Golan Heights, it is very clear, as I said previously, the Israeli law was implemented there on 1981, some 44 years ago, and in any possible future agreement, it will be remain part of the state of Israel.
Now to the war in Iran. The country's Deputy Foreign Minister Majid Ravanchi says the U.S. must rule out any further strikes on Iran if it wants to resume diplomatic talks. He was making the comment during an interview with the BBC. Ravanchi says the Trump administration told Iran through mediators that it wanted to return to negotiations this week, but had not made its position clear on the very important question of further attacks while talks are taking place. The US and Iran were involved in talks over Iran's nuclear program when Israel struck Iranian nuclear sites and military infrastructure earlier this month, and Iran responded with missiles. The US became directly involved in the conflict on June 21st when it bombed 3 of Iran's nuclear sites. Takhtravanchi also said Iran would insist on being able to enrich uranium for what it says are peaceful purposes, rejecting accusations it is secretly moving towards developing a nuclear bomb. He said Iran had been denied access to nuclear material for its research program, so they need to rely on themselves. All African countries have been giving measured statements on the war between Israel and Iran, calling for peace on both sides. But geopolitical risk and defense consulting expert Onyekachi Adukoya says countries in the continent need to do more than engage in pacifist positions. He says lessons for Africa is on how to boost its military and security apparatus to enable it explore different approaches to peace building.
On the position of Africa and Nigeria, of course, we have a non-annihilist position as a country in Nigeria, and our foreign policy position sometimes a bit clumsy and confusing. So it's fine to take the part of peace, but what lessons are we learning? It's a good question to ask, really, because the sneak attack on Iran followed a similar pattern to the sneak attack on Russia. Same thing, same principles, same objectives, different methodologies, but the same thing. And every time I think about Nigeria, and I think about our military assets, defense assets, and I think about the alliance in the Sahelian states and the geopolitical conflict going on in the Sahel, the challenges with Francophone Africa, and just to look at the level of destabilization that Iran suffered and its ability to recover, in merely 2-3 days, and launch its own response was quite remarkable. So I'm thinking, how prepared is Nigeria were we to suffer a complex attack like this? What communication systems do we have? How resilient are they? Our weapons manufacturing systems are totally dependent on foreign powers, and we say we are the giant of Africa, So when the conflict tilts out of the Western Asia part and the pivot to Asia is achieved, the door to Africa is open. And we're now nearing a geopolitical scenario where might is right and everybody's arming up to the teeth. And Africa is taking a pacifist position. Meanwhile, Pakistan the other day has just announced that it's going to go ahead and modernize its nuclear arsenal and achieve supersonic missile systems. The question is, what's to stop any great power tomorrow that sees Africa as ready for the blocking and decides to move in on Africa? How resilient are our own defense systems? Because that's the order we are in. You've heard the talk about New World Order, New World Order. The UN is failing and, looks to become obsolete in the near term. What we find obtainable now is what we call a global strategic world order, where nations enter into alliances for their own national interests first. That's why you see alliances like BRICS coming up, the CSO, the Quads, the Five Eyes, the EU, NATO. We are now in that order where every country must think what is in it for my country and what is in it for my people. So in the midst of all these conflicts going on, while we are having our regional conflicts in Africa, is to ask ourselves questions. In the scheme of armaments, where is Africa? Where are we in Nigeria in terms of our weapon systems? How are we able to project and protect our interests in Africa or even in West Africa? Do we have the near-term capability? Do we have a 5-year plan, 10-year plan? Because this current phase of a multipolar world, where we've moved from a single polar hegemon, which was the United States, to now having competitors in Russia, in China. For this war in Iran, for example, Pakistan took a position, China and Russia those are nuclear powers taking a position to support Iran. So we are going to see more of this clash of interests. And Africa, of course, is the next frontier, as it were. So African leaders must begin to think about their own internal security, how they do the diplomacy, what is the need for Africa in any position that we take.
There's more on what Onyekachi Adekoya said on Diplomatic Channel. It airs tonight at 8:30 on Sky 515 in the UK and 11:30 on DSTV 420. You can catch it on the playlist on Channels Television on YouTube. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has signed a decree on June 27 to coordinate sanctions against Russia with international partners, particularly the European Union and the Group of Seven. The president's office made the comment on the website. Just a day earlier, EU member states leaders gave their political consent to extend the sanctions previously imposed on Russia for its war against Ukraine. The EU Committee of Permanent Representatives also extended sectoral sanctions against Russia for another 6 months on June 26. Citing a diplomatic source, the sanctions include restrictions against entire sectors or industries of the Russian economy or areas of operation of businesses in Russia. Meanwhile, participants did not approve the new 18th package of sanctions, which targeted Russia's energy and banking sectors due to Slovakia's veto. President Zelensky's June 27 decree implements a decision by Ukraine's National Security and Defense Councils to synchronize the sanctions against Russia with the EU and the G7. And what does it truly feel like to wake up in a country consumed by war, where every day could bring new devastation, in a conflict where both sides are convinced of their righteous cause? Who do you trust? In the harrowing first installment of our series on the 3-year war between Russia and Ukraine, Channels Television brings you an unfiltered first-hand account of the human impact through the eyes of our correspondent, Kayode Okikiolu.
This is, without question, one of the longest train rides of my life. And not just because it lasts nearly 5 hours. What makes it even longer is where it leads. I'm on a train to Ukraine, a nation still gripped by war since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022. A war that has claimed over 170,000 lives. I just read the news that Kyiv has just been hit by the deadliest missile and drone attacks since the war began. 28 people killed, and that's the country I'm headed into. But how did I get here? My journey started at the Václav Havel Airport in Prague, Czechia. A country with its own deeply etched scars of war and occupation. In Prague, I joined 11 other top journalists from across 8 African nations, invited to understand the war, not just as news, but as lived experience. Next, we meet a war journalist who shows us the ropes. Using a map, I ask her just how bad the situation is.
After the operation that Ukrainian did in Russia, I would be more not afraid, but more careful. Yeah, careful. When there's a siren, I would go to the basement. I would know where you can be and stuff like that.
For deeper context, we attend the Global Security Summit, where I had the opportunity to meet with Czechia's president, Petr Pavel. In a private session, I asked him what we must do to have peace. His response was that we must learn to share as a people. From Prague, we head to Warsaw, a nation that has also seen war. given birth to that saying that Warsaw never saw war until war saw Warsaw.
On Hitler's orders, the burning and dynamiting of whatever was still left standing. 150,000 civilian residents killed. The evacuation of the city, 1 million people.
After the sober reflection, I stopped briefly at the Nigerian embassy in Poland, a moment of cultural connection before entering unfamiliar territory.
You are Polish now, so come.
Then the long journey to Ukraine begins from the Polish border of Przemyśl. Once a haven for thousands fleeing Ukraine in the war's early days. Getting into a war zone is never simple. The train was leaving any moment, but the border guard was not in a hurry. Finally cleared, I hurried to the train. The coaches are occupied mostly by women and children, and that was my first real reminder. I was heading into war.
It was really hot, I must say, in this place.
Next on the series.
Attention, air raid alert. Proceed to the nearest shelter.
A threat of a missile attack on our location as we take refuge in a shelter.
Goodness me.
I visited a building that was split in half by a missile attack. And I meet a Nigerian who's still living in Ukraine in spite of the war. A sober moment as I visit the final resting place of soldiers who died in the war. And then a conversation with prisoners of war, some of them Africans.
We have joining us now Kayode Okikiola, returned from that remarkable journey. Kayode, it's great to see you in flesh and blood.
It's great to be back.
Wow, what a trip it must have been for you. Just how do you feel, how has this changed your perception on life, returning back to Nigeria from the brink of war?
That's a great question, because watching that again, it took me back. I thought, you think you've recovered, but your stories never leave you, the experiences never leave you. First, it's transformational. The me before the trip through Prague, Warsaw, and of course ending in Lviv, Kyiv, and some other towns is a different person entirely. On the one hand, you want to be grateful that, things are not really as bad in Nigeria. Fine, there are a few wars going on in Africa, but in Nigeria, it's not like full-blown war. There's no air raid alerts. You don't have to proceed to the shelter. You're not watching your back on a daily basis in that sense. And then you realize that this is the experience of some people. It was very intense emotionally, very intense physically. Just going through those visuals and reliving those moments, I'm really emotional right now. It's a journalist's dream, am I right? So you know that journalists, we want to go there.
I also wanted to go there.
Exactly, and report so you can give people at least as close to an unbiased account as possible. This is what's happening in that sense. So beyond the headlines, you go there. So it's our dream. Once you hear the story, you want to go there. You don't think about safety first. It's afterwards you then start thinking safety.
But there were precautions taken, right?
Oh, absolutely, precautions. And let me just say, reading through the precautions, you see written in bold letters, there are currently no cities in Ukraine safe. And the advisory says that anyone may face direct or indirect fire, missile attacks by, the forces. You may also encounter landmines, unexploded ordnance, booby traps, snipers. Wow. So you really have to pay attention to all of that.
How did that make you feel? Did it introduce new fears into you, knowing that, this was probably one of the most dangerous trips you'd ever make in your life? The fact that you could be hit randomly by a missile fire from Russia, and that could just be the end for you.
Oh, certainly. I think it's the one thought that stays, but you try to avoid as well. It's right there in front of you. You're thinking about it, but you also try not to think about it. But then you see the people living there, and you think, well, they're here. It's not. It is bad, but the fact that they're here should count for something in that sense.
Yeah, and you did meet a Nigerian. You know, they say that you would find a Nigerian
Anywhere.
in every part of the world. So even in war-torn Ukraine, what was that man still doing there?
Very good question. I had a very lengthy interview with him, which will be part of the series. And, you know, for him, he had stayed there for 40 plus years.
Wow.
So leaving was almost like betrayal. In fact, those were his words.
It was not an option for him.
Yeah, he said, if I leave this country that made me, because I came there as a young person, right? And he's been able to build a business, raise a family. And he said, Kaide, if I leave this country now, it's like I'm betraying this country, so I'm choosing to stay. And he said, well, he has told his family members, because he still has ties to his roots back home, that, you know what, you can actually die anywhere, right? So if it's not my time, I'm not going to die. It's a very interesting conversation I had with him, Amarati, very interesting. But I must say that it was very intense, because you have to compartmentalize a lot. You take it in, compartmentalize. You're a human, you're a journalist, you're trying to cover the story, also try to be empathetic. It's a lot juggling it together.
You know, we could literally see the fear in your eyes on that train from Poland all the way to Kyiv. You know, I pointed that out to you as we watched, you know, that report, that incredible report, by the way. I could literally see the fear in your eyes on the train. And then you said that, you know, you noticed more women and children, and that actually began the reality for you, the fact that you were actually going into a war-torn area, and then you heard the siren. Tell us about your experience, hearing that, running to shelter, and what was going through your mind. Who were the first people you were thinking about? I'm sure your wife and your kid.
Certainly. Maybe I should backtrack a bit. So when the government of Czech Republic, reached out and said, you know what, there's this trip, would like African journalists to, you know, to visit Ukraine. It was a partnership between the Czechia government, Poland, and Ukraine, and of course the European Union. As journalists, you say, why not? If not, let's jump it. And then you repeat in your mind that this is Ukraine you're going into, and then your mind naturally runs riot. So on that train from Przemysl, which is Poland town, it's a border, to Lviv, that's when it started dawning on me. Like, your life choices, you really need to think about these life choices that you make. But again, the journalist in me said, well, you take risks, right? I mean, we've covered disasters, you've covered fires. So that was the moment it dawned on me, and I was thinking, you know, you may not be doing the right thing, and you may be doing the right thing, but whatever comes out of it, you take it. So when we got to Lviv, by the way, the first aerial alert was in Lviv, and the other one was in Kyiv. The one I showed there was in Kyiv, and you know, I had to go all the way down, and at that moment I thought, well, if this is it, this is it. You just zero your mind and say, whatever comes, you have to face it. So yes, my mind was running riot, but thank God for technology. So I could see the cities that were under attack. I could actually see what was happening in those areas.
Yeah, but Kaide, you did have some survival instincts, right?
Oh yes, as a Nigerian, it comes naturally.
Yeah, the Nigerian in you just, you know, if you know, push had come to shove, if you had been faced with an airstrike, you already saw your exits. You already saw ways that you could stay alive for as long as possible, right?
Well, yes. And I must say that, you know, European countries they've seen a lot of war. So some of them are actually built for war. So you're building your house, you're making provisions for a shelter. In this part of the world, you're building your house and you're making provision for
water and electricity.
Exactly. So there's no shelter. You don't think about that. That's not a possibility. So it's something, I mean, in Ukraine, from the high school, you start getting trained for military service. So it's something that is, you know, sort of ingrained. In Russia, even younger. And that's when they start getting trained. So yes, it's at the back of your mind. But you also have to understand that, you know, you're helpless during war, because you're not in charge of anything in that sense. Anything can happen and you'll be at risk.
Tell us about your experience in Kyiv, because that is where President Volodymyr Zelensky is believed to be sheltering. I'm sure he's in one of the bunkers, you know, from where he makes his video addresses to the rest of Ukraine and to the rest of the world. What was that experience like? I saw in the video you did make a trip to the cemetery. You did see a building that was hit by airstrikes, and just your general outlook on the place.
So the visit to Kyiv, so Kyiv is a city, and then there's the oblast, that's the province, the Kyiv oblast around it. So Kyiv is sort of surrounded, it's like a wall. The Kyiv oblast is surrounding Kyiv. So we visited some of the preoccupied areas like Bucha. You recall Bucha was occupied, and there was that massacre, over 400 people killed. I think that was one of the most emotional for me, because you see the mass grave, you see the bodies that were left on the streets, some of them their hands tied, left to rot, you know, in the weather. Visited Borodyanka, also in Kyiv Oblast, some of those places that were occupied, Irpin, and the rest. But visiting the cemetery, which by the way was in Lviv, because apparently every city has their cemeteries, because I got there just moments after someone who was born the same week as was born was buried.
Wow.
And it hit me again. You know, you have moments where it just hits you, keeps hitting you. And that really messed me up, because you could see his picture, and you see other people's pictures, some in their 20s, their 30s, some as old as 50, 60. They had smiles on their faces. These are people that had calendars filled with things they wanted to do. Right. They had family members, and from time to time, you see their family members come to tend to the area. Yeah. It is an experience that it messes with you. It also toughens you up, and then it just reinforces that that line in your mind that war is terrible and we must never have war.
Well, you're back now.
I'm back.
I'd like to talk about, you know, your first few hours back on Niger soil and the relief that you felt coming back to familiarity, you know, coming back to a place of, for us here in Lagos, a place of peace, even though unfortunately it's not the same, you know, across the country. Yeah. But for coming to Lagos, I mean, and then having been out there, it kind of gives you more appreciation for some of the crisis that's going on in this country. I remember that, you know, as you were preparing that report on Sunday, you did talk about when you arrived, I think in Poland or in Kyiv, you had heard about the massacre in Benue State. Yeah. How do you now compare the two crises? I mean, we're not at war, but, you know, we're going through a lot in this country.
It's almost like we're at war, Amarachi. And I remember speaking to some of the officials in Ukraine, and I mentioned to them that, you know, 200 people had just been killed in Nigeria, in Benue, and there was that shock on their face. Like, are you people at war? I imagine that was what was going through their minds. Because for them, just a few days before, 28 people were killed in that building in Kyiv. So 28 people killed in Kyiv, 200 people killed in Benue. What hurts, again, is the kind of response you get. For that, you get a lot of response globally and all of that. But for the Benue situation, it's quite different. It's not the headline.
Some didn't even hear about it.
It's not breaking news. No, it's not as big, and you don't see all of that response. Again, I'm not trying to compare these situations because they're different in that sense, but you clearly know that more should be done. So as much as we appreciate, but you also see the resilience that these people have. Destruction happens, and the next moment they're back trying to rebuild. They really come together and try to make sure that those who are left homeless have some sort of food, shelter. In almost everywhere you go to, there's a box for you to give donation. I could go on and on about this, but...
we will hear more of your stories, right? Because it's a three-part series. Yeah. We've only just gone through the first. Looking forward to the remaining two. Coyote, I can't say it enough. It's great to have you back.
It's great.
And it's also, it's wonderful having to see Ukraine firsthand through your eyes. The second-hand experience for us is, it's immeasurable. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. The EU High Representative Kaja Kallas has underscored the unprecedented closeness of EU-Armenia relations. During a visit to Yerevan today, she welcomed Armenia's legislative steps towards EU accession to the EU, announcing a political agreement on a new partnership agenda focusing on economic development, security and resilience. To support these priorities, the EU is offering a €270 million resilience and growth plan for 2024 to 2027, aimed at boosting Armenian businesses' connectivity with the EU and reform implementation. Beyond economic cooperation, the EU is providing humanitarian assistance for displaced Karabakh Armenians and investing in psychological and housing support. The EU also confirmed progress on visa liberalization, with the Commission adopting its proposal for an action plan, an important step in strengthening people-to-people ties. Security cooperation was deepened through the signing of a framework participation agreement, enabling Armenia to take part in EU crisis management missions. The EU monitoring mission in Armenia continues to play a key role in promoting regional peace and stability. In discussions on Armenia-Azerbaijan relations, the EU reaffirmed its support for the normalization process based on sovereignty, territorial integrity, and border inviolability. The EU also plans to engage Armenia under the Black Sea strategy, especially on connectivity and regional cooperation. Just checking on the weather in Europe, a record number of heat alerts are in place across France as the country and other parts of southern and eastern Europe remain in the grip of soaring temperatures. Some 84 of 96 of France's mainland regions, known as departments, are currently under an orange alert, the country's second highest. France's climate minister Agnès Pannier-Runacher has called it an unprecedented situation. Heat warnings are also in place for parts of Spain, Portugal, Italy, Germany, the UK, and Balkan countries, including Croatia. Both Spain and Portugal had their hottest June days on record at the weekend. El Granado in Andalusia also saw a temperature of 46 degrees Celsius on Saturday, while 46.6 degrees Celsius was recorded in the town of Moura in central Portugal on Sunday. Many countries have emergency medical services on standby and are warning people to stay inside as much as possible. We did mention the UK as being part of the countries experiencing high temperatures. London experienced what could be one of the hottest June days on record. Authorities urging people to keep safe. Temperatures are expected to soar well above 30 degrees Celsius, but it's not forecast to be the capital's all-time heat record for the month, when temperatures reached 35.6 degrees Celsius on June 29th in 1957. Dr. Lynn Thomas, the medical director for St. John Ambulance, said the heat is wonderful for some people, but can cause an awful lot of stress. Amber alerts covering the capital, Yorkshire and the Humber, the East Midlands, West Midlands, East of England, South East and South West have been extended to 9 British Standard Time on Wednesday. She advised people to take precautions to avoid overheating and to check on those who could be particularly vulnerable. A spokesperson for the Mayor of London said that with increased demand on emergency services, it's really important that Londoners look out for older people, children and pets and take sensible precautions to stay cool and beat the heat. Floodwaters have submerged homes in Luzhou, Guangxi, and in southern China as emergency workers mount relief efforts after a week-long deluge sent rivers surging and inundating residential areas for a second time in a week. Homes and streets have been seen submerged on Sunday as heavy rains caused rivers to flood while emergency crews evacuated stranded residents. As per official reports, more than 80,000 people have been evacuated and at least 6 have died after widespread flooding also struck the neighboring province of Guizhou. Luzhou flooding was driven by sharp rises in the Dulio River, swelling upstream. Inflows from Guizhou, the surge forced over 1,300 residents from their homes in Fulu Township alone, with 3,655 people relocated across Sanjiangdong Autonomous County. While water levels have now receded, several neighborhoods remain affected. No fatalities have been reported in Guangxi. Town's Nyanga KTC informal settlements are enduring dire conditions after heavy rains and a cold front unleashed floods across the region over the weekend. 8 organizations have launched a humanitarian response in the area, distributing hot meals, blankets, warm clothing, hygiene kits, and other emergency supplies. The group estimates around 5,000 people in the community are in urgent need of support. Cape Town Disaster Risk Management spokesperson Sonika Lickgan confirmed the teams are continuing to assess the flood-hit areas to determine the scale of relief required. The flooding follows days of strong winds and heavy downpours that have affected several parts of South Africa, including in Mitchell's Plain, Makassar, Nyanga, and the Cape Winelands.
Got damage. My food, everything's got damage. So I want to stay in bed every time because I can't walk. I'm using walking sticks every day. So, it's so painful. Every year, everything is going like this every year. I'm sure it's about the 3rd time now. But in winter, the same thing applies as this every year. Anything, any help I need it, because I can't stay in water every time. Every year I must stay in water. Any assistance I need it, really. Arthritis, I'm suffering from arthritis. I can't walk properly. I'm using walking aid.
Many people are affected with floods every year. Every year, it's been more than years. I can't even count how many years do we affected with floods. And every year it's still the same. We don't receive any proper planning or any proper assistance.
Angola is set to host the 2nd UN Tourism and ICAO Ministerial Conference on Tourism and Air Transport in Africa, taking place in Luanda from July 22nd to the 24th of this year. Along with the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the African Union Agenda 2063, the conference aims to identify challenges and opportunities to enhance air connectivity and seamless travel across Africa, strengthen dialogue between tourism and air transport stakeholders to address key business imperatives, and encourage political commitments to investigating tourism and air transport priorities into national and regional agendas. Africa holds immense potential for tourism and air transport growth, yet significant opportunities remain untapped. In 2024, the continent saw a record surge in international arrivals at 74 million, translating into 7% more arrivals compared to 2019 and 12% more than in 2023, underscoring the vital role of air transport in tourism expansion. Given their independence, this high-level conference will focus on fostering stronger synergies between the two sectors to drive economic growth and sustainable development. The program will also feature an expert workshop on tourism and air transport on July 22nd. I have joining me now from Luanda, the Angolan Minister for Tourism, Marcio de Jesus Lopez Daniel. He joins me from the Presidential Palace. Minister Daniel, thank you for joining me on the program today.
Thank you, and my pleasure to have this stage to speak a bit about this very important conference that Angola will be hosting from 22 to 24 July this year, to an amazing opportunity to discuss important matters to our continent.
Well, let's start off with that. The conference is later this month. Why is it so important for Luanda, especially? Why this destination this year?
Yeah, I will say that for emphasize the importance of this meeting is that if we now speak with a young African boy or young African girl, they simply don't understand why comparing to other continents like Europe or Latin America, another young boy, another young girls can travel inside the continent without any necessity of showing up visa papers or making connectivity that don't go directly to one point to another. You have to take a lot of connections, sometimes even having the connections outside of the continent. So each time in this conference is a call for action. Is a call for action for African leaders to engage on two essential matters. One is to discuss how to implement visa-free policies within African countries. So Africans don't need to show up visas when they travel to another African countries. And this is an important key to boost the tourism between African countries. But we cannot speak about tourism without air connectivity. That's why we're bringing together these two important international organizations, which is the Organization for Tourism, the UN Tourism, and the ICAO, which is the International Association for Civil Aviation. We are bringing these two organizations, the experts, the head companies, the tourism companies. So we will host all the ministries for tourism and transport in Africa in order to discuss this matter. And I believe that it's time for African leaders present solutions to those important matters for all Africans across the continent.
So I do understand that Angola is working on a visa-free policy for African countries. That is important, of course, for tourism. If you're asking people to come in and you boast of so much lovely beaches, a vibrant nightlife, things that you normally see in countries that, you want people to come to. These are, selling points for most African countries, so that people come to relax, come to really see the country as a tourism destination. Where is Angola now with its visa-free policy?
Angola has done some steps toward this destination, which is a visa-free policy. We have visa exemptions for most of African countries and for most of Western and Asian countries. We are discussing internally in order to achieve this particular goal, which is the visa exemptions in order to boost tourism. We count on that with some very good experience. There are some African other countries that have already established this policy, like Benin, Ghana, and Rwanda, and some others. We want this conference, this summit, to be the place where they showcase how they have been implemented, what are the constraints that they face, and how can they now say that have succeeded these constraints that initially was in the way to this policy being carried out. And another very interesting policy that we are leading is the open skies policy between African countries, which is one of the second matters that will be discussed in this summit. Angola is now the chair of the African Union. Our president, President Lourenço, is pro tempore president of African Union. So we believe that during his term, we are committed to engage with other African countries, not just Angola by himself, not just the other African countries that have done this policy, but discussing we all together what are the constraints that still keeping us for achieve this goal, which is the Africa visa exemptions for all African countries for travels between the African countries, and the constraints in terms of air connectivity, mostly the open skies policy. That's That's why we believe that this is so important. What I would like also to emphasize is that Africa is the continent with the most growth population in the world. The future of the world definitely goes through Africa in terms of population growth. So this size of the population growth demands the job creation. So we believe that the tourism is the economic segment that can help us out with in terms of job creation. So the constraints that is on the way for boost tourism within African countries must be put away with these kind of discussions between the leaders, between the private sectors, between the representatives of the unions and the labor force, so they can come together and achieve what other continents have already achieved, and we will not stay in the last of this match.
Minister Daniel, participants at the conference will also get an opportunity to see Angola. We've seen the promotional video while you were speaking, answering my first question. What exactly do you want to show people? I mean, you're going to be the first port of call if you're inviting people to Africa and you're saying that Angola is ready. What are the opportunities that exist?
Yeah, let's say particularly speaking about Angola, which is an amazing destination. Angola is a country with a lot of attractions in terms of tourism. We have 1,605 kilometers of coast with very untouched beaches. So we have a desert. We have a particular area which is unique in the world, where the desert, like hugs the sea and makes an amazing destination. We also have the second biggest the waterfalls in Africa, just after the Vic Falls in Zambia and Zimbabwe, which is Kalandula Falls. And also Angola belongs to this transfrontier conservation area, which is the process, the Casa project, that we share the same wildlife and same nature as Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Namibia. So we have a lot of things to show, and of course, most important, the vibration of our people, the hospitality of our people, of our gastronomy, and our nightlife, our dancing, our music, that makes Angola an amazing destination, and will be a very delightful experience to those who will be visiting us during the conference. We have been preparing a very ambitious social program to attend the meeting and also have an opportunity to visit the country, to visit our experience and how beautiful our country is, and how open to the world and for investment and for visit of the people. So we are very exciting to host all of the participants to the conference.
Well, we can't wait to be there. Thank you so much, Minister Marcio de Jesus Lopez Daniel, for joining us on The World Today.
Thank you.
Now, unless you have no fear of heights, you might want to sit down for this story. We're talking about what has now been recognized as by the Guinness World Records as the world's longest glass-bottomed pedestrian bridge. It's only 632 meters long. It's already drawing tourists, countless of them, to Vietnam with its breathtaking, exhilarating views. On Sunday, many tourists were seen taking photos and enjoying the scenery while strolling on the bridge, which spans 150 meters above lush greenery. By nighttime, this bridge transforms into a fairy tale spectacle, glowing with dazzling lights. The Ba Long, or White Dragon Bridge, was inaugurated on April 30 in 2022. It was recognized by Guinness World Records less than a month after opening as the world's longest glass-bottomed pedestrian bridge, beating the previous world record holder. a 530-meter bridge in China's Guangdong province. And when you do find a chair, you might want to get comfortable to partake in the 8,000 kilograms of grilled chicken prepared in Argentina, just to break the Guinness World Record for the largest quantity of grilled chicken meat. The event was held as part of celebrations marking the 242nd anniversary of the town's founding. To achieve the record, local authorities partnered with FEPASA, a major regional meat packing company celebrating its own 60th anniversary. FEPASA donated the thousands of chicken that were grilled simultaneously during this event. It was also a charitable event. The record was broken. The grilled chickens were distributed to more than 60 social institutions, which sold them to raise funds for their projects. An official Guinness World Records judge supervised the attempt to ensure that all requirements were met. Previously, the record was held by Uruguay, which in 2016 grilled over 6,000 kilograms of chicken in a single day. Best to have a Guinness World Record on a full tummy. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.